Okay, so we'll go ahead and begin. So welcome. Today we are excited to introduce All Life is Yoga, a new series of discussions, talks, and interviews hosted by LaGrasse Center here in Fountain Inn, South Carolina. I'm Rade. I'm the Executive Director of the LaGrasse Center, and I am joined by my colleague, Vladimir Yatsenko. All life is yoga is a well-known quote by Sri Aurobindo. Here, the term yoga is not meant as asana or pranayama practices. Rather, yoga, a Sanskrit term translated as union, is meant in the traditional Eastern sense. Yoga is the way in which one arrives in union with the truth of his or her being or with the divine. When our daily activities, be it relationships or family, work, even physical activities, are performed while in union with our innermost truth of being, then our outer consciousness is transformed, and this deeper, more universal consciousness is reflected and expressed in all aspects of life. Indeed, all life becomes yoga. Another well-known quote from Sri Aurobindo is, "All problems of existence are essentially problems of harmony." With this in mind, during the next 3 months, All Life is Yoga will explore ways to live more harmoniously with oneself, others, nature, and the universe at large through featured talks such as today's topic on Vastu, as well as others on Ayurveda, Yantras, Vedic astrology, palmistry, and more. So today we are greatly honored to have Sherry Silverman with us as our first speaker from this new series. Sherry is the founder and CEO of Transcendence Design. She is a leading Vastu, sacred space, conscious design consultant. She is an artist, meditation teacher, and writer. She has worked with Vastu clients in the US and internationally for over 20 years. The author of an acclaimed Vastu book, Sherry is also one of the leading Vastu experts in the world. In addition to aligning homes and businesses with the laws of nature, she brings comfort, functionality, individuality, and beauty to any conscious design project. So Sherry, welcome to All Life is Yoga. It's such a pleasure to have you here today. And I'm very much looking forward to learning more about this ancient sacred art and science. And I have a few questions for you about Vastu, if that's okay. And as well, I'd like to invite our attendees to post any questions they might have for you in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. And time permitting, Sherry will answer your questions towards the end of our session. So
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, Rade.
great. So Sherry, let's start maybe with hearing a little bit more about your personal background. And I'm very interested to hear how you first discovered Vastu and what it was that attracted you to this ancient art and science.
That's a good question because it is really foundational. How do you get attracted or interested in something? We always listen to our inner guidance, and we know that if something appeals, that it's worthwhile to check it out. And I had been meditating for a few years and was in a Vedic studies doctoral program in Europe with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. This is back in 1975. And he talked about the fact that we should always keep our rooms clean and tidy to welcome the divine. And that sounded really, really nice. It made a big impression for me. And I remember another time walking to a plant nursery with someone else who was helping to decorate the hall. And she just said all of a sudden, angels don't like dirt. And I thought, wow, I just never had thought of it quite from that angle. But of course, we all know that whenever you clean a space, it just revs up the energy and it feels much more sparkly and nice to be there. And that seemed to go with what Maharishi had been saying. And he had also said that in our rooms, when we were at a desk, not to have it be a shallow desk that's facing directly into a wall, because it would restrict our creativity, that there should be some sense of expansiveness out in front of us. And that really made sense too, especially because I remembered in high school, I had this very, very narrow desk that my father had built into a bookcase. And it was really close, and it did feel kind of confining. So those were points that actually have to do with Vastu, but I had not heard the term yet. And then, over the years, I kept meditating and teaching meditation. And then I guess it was around the mid 90s. I was doing doctoral research on sacred space and sacred architecture, um, consciousness. I was researching things like the point that forms emerge from in a creation experience, that you can experience in meditation, where you're seeing that junction point, the Bindu point, where the forms come into the physical plane. And all this together just had me looking at books about Vastu. And there weren't really many books about Vastu at that point. And I started researching it because I got really interested. And there was almost nothing available. And most of it just seemed very weird. It seemed just full of superstition and feng shui repackaged and a lot of just garbled knowledge. And I remembered that when I'd been on this Vedic Studies doctoral program 20 years prior, that Maharishi had told our group that we would know where the mistakes were in Vedic translations. And he didn't really explain why we would know, but I thought, well, it must be because our intuition would be improved because we've been meditating for so long. Because we all know that your meditation, your mental clarity, your sensitivity to your environment, all these things improve when we're doing authentic meditation practices that give us that experience of that fourth state, Turiya, unbounded pure awareness. So I would be reading these articles on the internet or little books I would find, and I would be crossing out some things and circling others. And it just got to the point where I would just keep researching it. And then I was staying with a friend, and she said, could I help her with her house? Because she really wanted her business to improve and she wanted a boyfriend. And so I went in with her and we did this and moved these things around and changed a few things. And then the next day, there were literally 3 guys at the door who were after her. And her clients that were coming in kept saying, oh, what did you do? It feels and looks so nice in here. And I thought, oh, well, this is interesting. And then I went to stay with another friend so we could we were going to go out to dinner and go to a play. And afterwards, we got back to her house and I just went into her guest bedroom thinking, okay, it's already past 10 o'clock, my bedtime. I'm just going to go to sleep. But she walked in, she says, would you mind looking at my bedroom before you go to bed? Because I'm having trouble sleeping and I've heard that you're really good at this. So I went into her bedroom and I said, do this and this and this and this, and then went to sleep. The next morning, she just ran into my room and she said, I have to tell you what happened. I was so excited about all these things you suggested and I changed all of it before I went to sleep. And she said, you're right. I slept better. And that tree, you're right. It was happier when I did those things. And you're really good at this and you should start doing it. And I was like, oh, okay. And so that's why I started doing it. And then I went to another friend's house and she said, oh, what do you charge? This was like 1998, 99, something like that. And I said, oh, $100. Well, I wasn't thinking of the fact that she had a 5,000 square foot house on 3 levels. And it was going to take me quite a while to do this. And she felt badly, so she took me to lunch afterwards because I'd been there for hours. Anyway, all these people noticed big changes and were really happy with it. So I just started doing it. And then the Asian Art Association of the Denver Art Museum said that they really wanted me to do a presentation at the museum. So I did this lecture at the Asian Art Museum. And there were a lot of questions afterwards, including people standing up and talking about what a difference I'd made for them, which was pretty wild. There was an advertising firm that I'd gone to, and apparently their business exploded after I did their first consultation. And she stood up to talk about it. And then people were asking, well, what books should we read? And at the time, there was absolutely nothing that I could wholeheartedly recommend. And so they said, well, you need to write a book. So I started writing a book, which is how this happened.
Yes, yes, that's I've got one too. It's a beautiful book, beautiful and very well written and very easy. So you had mentioned the other things that you had read about Vastu is sort of hard to understand and explain, and this is not only beautiful in looks and pictures, but beautiful in the language and the simplicity that you bring to Vastu. So it's one of a kind, definitely. And I would also say, sure, I'm just going to mention, I don't have a lot of experience with Vastu, but as you were mentioning the response of some of your friends and then your clients, I did attend one of Dr. Lad's weekend programs in Vastu at the Ayurvedic clinic, who I know you had done some work for the Institute. Would love to ask you about that in a little bit. But he had made a number of suggestions based on different things in the home. And was sitting next to a close friend, and she was frantically writing these down, 7 or 8 things. And she went home, and that night, before even going to bed, she couldn't wait. She made these changes, and she was having some specific health issues.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, within a week, she felt that the changes that he had suggested just in the course of a weekend workshop, very simple things, had a tremendous impact on the energetics of her home and ultimately on her health. So I too have seen some powerful effects of Vastu. Maybe because our attendees are probably not very familiar with Vastu, could you explain some of the fundamental principles or objectives of Vastu?
Sure. Okay, Vastu is a sister science of meditation and Ayurveda. And basically, it is the science of architecture and design. What it's doing is creating a better situation where your environment is more supportive of you. We make our environment more supportive of us by getting more in tune with the laws of nature. The laws of nature are how everything in the universe is structured. And there are certain vibratory elements that are 100% in tune with that, and others that are very out of tune with it. Anything we can do to bring our lives more in alignment with the laws of nature will improve our lives. It's as if all of nature is rising up to support us rather than throwing obstacles in our path. Having obstacles in our path is never a good thing. We've all had days, maybe even longer periods sometimes, where everything seems to be just fighting us and creating resistance and preventing us from fulfilling our tasks, our desires, or just being able to get through the day smoothly. And so anything we can do, meditation, yoga, letting go, Ayurveda, Vastu tips, any of this that we apply to our lives is a big plus. You could say that there's always room for improvement. This is a life that we're living on this planet presents certain challenges, especially these days when we've had a pandemic for over a year. People are a little stressed out, things aren't going as smoothly. You're having to figure out what really is in alignment with your purpose and with your everyday life, and listen to it, because we can't really afford to keep fighting nature. So we're being given this opportunity to get more in alignment with nature. And basically, Vastu is based on the mechanics of creation, which is a really lovely thing. In the Vedic system, which fundamentally is the mechanics of creation, there are 5 elements, which you've probably run into before: earth, air, fire, water, and space. That's not the typical way to list them because they're a little jumbled and out of order. Usually we say them from either the most dense to the most subtle, or the most subtle to the most dense, but that's mixing them together. So there's 5 elements, and once anything is in the physical realm, it's made up of those 5 elements in different proportions. With Vastu, when you create a structure like a house, and this applies to all buildings, but we'll just talk about homes for now because everyone has some place that they live, ideally. As soon as you start laying the foundation and setting up where the house is going to be, actually beginning the construction, then the 5 elements gather in particular sectors. Each of those sectors will look and feel the same, but in one sector, the northeast, water element will be predominant. It won't feel wetter over there. You won't walk over there and say, oh, there's an increase in humidity, but on a very subtle level, that's happening. In the center of the space is space element, akasha, that expansiveness. Fire element is predominant in the southeast. Earth element is predominant in the southwest. And air element is predominant in the northwest. What we do with Vastu is we keep those in mind when we're building a structure or when we're living in an existing structure. Most homes and buildings on the planet were built in total ignorance of this amazing knowledge. And so we have buildings that create additional problems because of their structure. It's like getting another birth chart. I think you're probably going to be, if you haven't already studied Jyotish Vedic astrology, you'll probably be looking into that. And this is another way of looking at what are the particular parameters that are needing attention or needing to be noticed or having an influence on you in this particular lifetime. We all have very different birth charts because we've all manifested on the physical plane at a different specific intersection of space and time. When we get a house or an apartment or a room in a dormitory, then we have another set of parameters. And if, for example, you have a weak sun in your birth chart and you're living in a house that has a blocked east, where on the eastern wall there's no doors or windows to let in those very nourishing eastern energies, then it's like a double whammy. You're going to get hit with, in some way, those issues of sun will be challenged in your life. And so someone else moving into a house that has a blocked east might not feel the effect of that as much as you would if you have a debilitated east sun in your birth chart. what we do is we try to remove obstacles in any way on all levels, and then we just don't mind. So we do what we can, and then we just live our lives. But when we find out these bits of knowledge, it's really handy to be able to apply them. And that's why people notice, oh, I feel better. For example, Southwest, being earth element, is a grounded, quiet type of place. And it's a good place for the master bedroom. It's the major place to put your master bedroom. I did a consult once for a couple, and they really were not sleeping well. They both were very serious about their careers, very committed, worked very hard, and they were exhausted. And when I looked at their floor plan, their bedroom was in a bad position. And yet there was another room on that floor that they could easily swap out and use for their master bedroom. So I suggested they do that. Now, a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to do that. I like using the master bedroom because it's large and yada, yada. Well, if you're going to be resistant, then you're not going to get the benefit if you don't give it a chance. They were completely fine with trying it out. So they moved their bed and they slept in the Southwest, and they had their head in the, I don't remember if it was the South or the East in that bedroom, but those are the, if you're looking for a little tip you can apply, the head of your bed is ideally in the South or the East or the Southeast. East is going to enhance your consciousness. South is very healing and a close second. North is not a good option. It wears you down. It's a biomagnetic electrical thing. And you're not going to get a deep rest, and you will age more quickly. I'm not aging more quick. Probably you aren't either. And so put the head of your bed, if you can, in the South, Southeast, or East. This, they want to apparently they both woke, turned and looked at each other, and they had both slept extremely well. Neither had apparently slept. They were completely energies. The sun always comes up in the east and sets in the west. There's slight, the sun doesn't say, I've been coming up in the east for millennia. I'm going to start rising in the west and setting in the north because I am just sick of it and I need a change. No, there's value in tradition, and these cosmic universals do not change. So we go by those cosmic universal energies. And basically, that means that the directions and the 5 elements are really, really important in Vastu. And those are some of the basics.
Great, thanks. That's so helpful, and I'm just like taking notes like crazy here as you're speaking and wondering which direction I wake up in the morning, etc. I wanted to go back to something you said, Sherry, that I found fascinating, and I had heard that this was possible, but never had actually seen it applied. And that was when you mentioned that you can actually get down to the client's individual birth chart, and based on that birth chart, decide the right Vastu principles to apply in the house, and thereby strengthening the different planets, as you referred to a weak sun, to make sure that that house or that those rooms are getting optimal amount of sunlight, and or the right rooms are facing the east, etc. And so what's curious and very interesting to me on this is that, of course, and I think I'm a Jyotishi, under Dr. Lod's guidance, learned how to integrate Jyotish and Ayurveda. I have Jyotish teachers that have integrated Jyotish with palmistry. And now we have Vastu. So my question here, and maybe it's a bit more of a comment, but it seems to me that probably very early on, many thousands of years ago, these were all one science and art. That somebody that knew Jyotish also knew Ayurveda, also knew Vastu, and you got this synergistic effect by bringing these sciences together. And as we kind of went through, entered the Kali Yuga and periods of ignorance, these got divided so that mankind can handle any single one of these. And I'm curious if this is a belief of yours, or if you've heard, if this is something that makes sense, because there's just so much synergy that can happen by bringing these together, that they must have at one time been one science and art.
They're all having the same basis, because there were great seers whose consciousness was so pure and enlivened and connected that they were able to perceive the knowledge in the atmosphere. There's an expression in Rig Veda, Richo Akshare Parame Vyoma, knowledge is structured in consciousness. The real knowledge isn't in the books, it's all around us, but people can't read it. And that's because they aren't enlightened. And there were certain enlightened beings who were able to perceive these laws of nature. The plants would talk to them. The Akasha would offer the knowledge that was structured inside of it. There was a loss of knowledge over time, which is what always happens. Probably everyone remembers when they were little kids, these games where you would have one person whisper something to one person, and then it would continue being whispered around in a circle around the whole room. And by the time it got back, it was all garbled and distorted. And this is what happens as knowledge gets lost over time with repetition, that it doesn't always come down in its purity. This is one of the reasons that the great wisdom traditions have put such an emphasis on the importance of the purity of the knowledge and keeping it crystal clear and not altering it. But it happens anyway. Plus, books get lost once they're written down. Natural disasters happen and people are lost before they can pass down their knowledge. I know that my main teacher of Vastu, Ganapati Stapati, said once that 60% at least of both Vastu and Jyotish have been lost.
Yeah, sure.
That what we're doing is picking up little fragments. And so it's powerful and it makes a difference. But there's so much missing. And so we just do the best we can.
Sure. And you seem to be a very intuitive person, so it also means that as you develop your capacity for intuition and sensitivity and connectedness with nature and the laws of nature, then that gap starts to lessen. You're filling in some of the space with innate intuition, or your own higher consciousness, if you will.
Yes, but on the other hand, some of this is not some of these bits of knowledge are not intuitive. Some of them are things that you really have to learn, that I'm not able to perceive how I could possibly figure it out on the level of intuiting or computing or something. So some of that's just not going to be accessible until my consciousness has a really major, major shift beyond what I'm experiencing now.
Mm-hmm.
So, what we do always is we do the best we can with what we have, and we don't get all agitated and beating up on ourselves that, oh, I didn't know this before, and I made mistakes, or I don't understand it all, and maybe I didn't explain it right, or I wasn't listening when I really needed to listen to this one thing. You just do the best you can at that point and not mind, let it
Sure.
go. Because if we
Sure.
start beating ourselves up over it, it's just throwing more dust in the nervous system, just creating more stress. Just
Absolutely.
very counterproductive.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I do see that some of the attendees are putting questions in the chat. If you have any questions for Sherry, just be sure to put them in the Q&A box, which is down below at the bottom to the right of the chat. We'd appreciate that. You mentioned directions, and you mentioned the elements, the correlation of those two. I see you also mentioned color in your book on Vastu. Can you say a little bit about how color correlates or is used in
Sure,
Vastu?
sure. Okay, first of all, know that when I first started researching this, I found all this information on color on all these different websites and books, and they all said completely different
Hmm.
things. Some of it just seemed like a bunch of hogwash. I mean, just really stupid, made up things. So, what I did in my book is I went through and looked at color from different approaches. First of all, you have to choose colors that you personally find pleasing. Always go by your own intuition and what gives you joy. I years and years ago, I was the practitioner of the day at a feng shui store. And this man came in and he said, oh, he and his wife had a feng shui consultation with this very expensive, prominent person. And she had told them very specific colors to paint all the rooms. They really did not like these colors, but she was the expert. So they went out and they bought all the paint and hired a professional painter, had the entire house painted.
Hmm. Hmm.
And they really didn't like the colors. And I heard this and I was thinking, oh my God, this is just, you don't go against your own nature. You always
Sure.
want to listen to yourself. What they should have done was to say, thank you, I respect your knowledge, if they wanted to be careful, but we don't really like lime green. Could we have forest green instead? Or we really don't like greens at all. Could we do golden tones instead? And then they could have had a discussion about it and come up with some colors that were going to work for them. But they didn't do
Hmm.
that. And I like sharing the story because I think it's really important for people to realize that you need to feel uplifted and happy and at home in your own home. Just because someone else says they love the color black doesn't mean that you have to wear black if you don't feel right in it. These things are different for everyone, and you should
Sure.
listen to it. So, to make sure that I can allow you to practice what I'm preaching, in my book, I'm giving you a lot of options. I talk about the colors of the rainbow and the effects of all of those. I'll talk about in terms of the chakras. And then I get into a section where I'm talking about colors in terms of Jyotish, because Jyotish has gemstone colors. And these are really specific. And it could be that some of those are going to work for you. For example, another way that these different sacred sciences mesh together is that the 9 grahas, or grabbers, the planetary bodies in Vedic astrology, are all in charge of various turf. So what that means is that there is a planet that is the lord or regent of all the different directions. And you can utilize that when you're thinking about room colors. Let's think about the most options. There's 9 planetary bodies, 9 grahas. There's only 8 directions if we're thinking the 4 cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west, the 4 secondary directions, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest, and there's 9 planets. Well, we get around this conundrum of reducing 9 into 8 by realizing that the northeast is considered a sacred zone. Therefore, it gets to have 2 different planetary lords. The primary is, you might imagine, Jupiter. And the secondary, if you had to think of another one, which other graha has to do with mystical, spiritual things?
Yeah, I would guess K2.
Yes, K2. So K2 is the secondary lord of the Northeast. So if we're thinking about colors to paint a Northeast room, Jupiter is the primary lord of the direction we would use his colors. And that would be a golden yellow, like a yellow sapphire. And so you could use a beautiful golden yellow in your Northeast room. On the other hand, you could be thinking in terms of the element that's predominant in the Northeast, which is water element. And you could use some beautiful blue-green, watery type of color, some color that you associate with water. That gives you quite a range of what could be an honoring color for that direction. Or it could be that you have a very Vata constitution. Not that I would know anything about that myself. And then you're going to want to think about what colors would be grounding and soothing. Now, one amusing thing about this is when I was first researching it, I would come across different so-called experts who said, oh, Vatas should have very delicate pastel colors. And I thought about this and went, ugh, totally not me at all. This does not feel right. I asked another friend who was same constitution as me when it comes to our primary and secondary doshas. And she said, pastel colors make me want to vomit. This is just so wrong. So clearly this was not getting a good response from 2 classic Vatas. So I thought, all right, there's something really wrong with the way some people are explaining this. But when I thought about earth colors and how grounding and soothing, I thought that is perfect. That really works. So using the colors for the predominant element could work. Now you may find that you love having different colors for all the rooms of your house, that you have a different kind of mood for different rooms because they have a different purpose. Or you may find that those soothing greens make me feel so good, I want to use them in a lot of my house. And it's up to you. It's a personal preference. Color is very powerful in its effect, but it is secondary, a very distant secondary to things like aligning with the 5 elements and the directions and their influence. But it is something really fun to play around with, and it can make your home more pleasing, more enlivening. You know, all homes should have comfort and functionality in addition to structure. And Vastu helps you fulfill the functionality and the comfort, but also brings in the element of beauty. One of the things I liked from the start about Vastu I guess because I'm an artist and I'm really sensitive to my environment and to that element of beauty, that if there's no beauty, it's not really Vastu. I just thought that was wonderful.
Thank you. And so it's interesting what you say about color and it being secondary. I'm wondering if the same is also true about different natural elements that are used in the house and or that the house is actually built out of, whether it be brick or wood, tile floors versus carpet or wood. Is this something that Vastu addresses or that you address in your consultations?
Yeah, if you think about it, Vastu is in alignment with the laws of nature. Basically, what you want to use is as much natural materials as possible. Just like with our diet, we want to eat healthy sattvic foods. We also want to eat organic because everything else has been so messed up that the body can't process it properly and it weighs us down and corrupts the true functioning of the nervous system. Same thing with a home. If there's a lot of plastic off-gassing and artificial materials, it's not going to have that kind of prana and life force that we want to have in the home. And so it's better to have wood, bamboo, wool, silk, these natural elements. Stone is nice, but you don't want to have a tremendous amount of stone. So I've seen houses that the whole exterior is stone and the walls on the inside are stone, and it's very pretty, but it's just too cold and harsh. So it's not the best choice to have everything be stone.
And way to ask you.
Okay, Radhe, I can't hear you right now. I'm hoping that you're coming back, but there's a problem with the recording. Yeah. Yeah. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. Radhe is frozen.
Mm.
So I'll just babble a bit until she comes back, but she's having a problem with her connection.
Great.
Okay. Unless Vladimir, can you think of a question now that you're piping in? What would do you have anything that this has brought up for you that you want to ask about?
Definitely. There are many questions in my mind, especially with regard to the Vedic vision. Right. You will have to, Radhe is here, so you have to change the setting here. If you change the setting to La Grace, it will be okay.
But it's already threw me out. I just go back in?
Yeah. The question I had in mind, this root vas has three meanings, or actually 6 meanings listed in the dictionary, one of which is to dwell in. It's quite interesting, yes? Other is to shine, and the other is to wear, when you put on yourself something. So we are wearing our environment, we are wearing our bodies, we are dwelling within certain context. And that dwelling, wearing, is beautifully described in the Isha Upanishad, the first shloka, yes, and that all this is for habitation by the Lord. Ishavasya sarvam. So all of this, the whole universe, all things which move in the universe are for his habitation. And I think this might be the deepest sense of Vastu Shastra, that the spirit, the most spiritual part, is to be to be inhabited in this environment. If the spirit is flowing literally directly and is happy to be within this body, within this cloth, within this environment, then that is the harmony between the inner and the outer. That's what came to my mind when you were explaining the Vastu.
Oh, that's quite beautiful. I've really enjoyed hearing how you perceive that. And that's because of the poetic grandeur and richness of Sanskrit, that there's so much meaning packed into every sound.
Yeah.
That it is like a poem or a puzzle that you can just turn and see different facets and find much more meaning in. And that is one of the great things about Vastu. You know, we have our homes as kind of a container for us for our environment, but on the other hand, our bodies are our home and our container, and yet we're much larger than our bodies. These physical bodies are much smaller than we really are. We just feel restricted to in our thinking that this is where I end, but it isn't, because we really are unbounded and our subtle bodies are much larger. So there's so much to it. And, you know, the thing about Vastu is it's embodied energy, energy that is dwelling within a structure. But that energy is unbounded. It's just being held a bit.
Okay. Sorry for the loss of internet there for a second.
I think we're all used to that.
Good. Well, we have maybe 10 or 12 minutes here, Sherry. I have a number of other questions, but maybe what we can do is see some of the questions that the attendees have, and if you just click
Sure.
on that Q&A box, and there's a number of them about your book and whether or not you teach class online or not. Now, I have put in the chat box your website where they can find out more, but maybe you want to just address what type of online services and training and education that you offer.
Sure. Okay. So Eric had asked a question about if I teach Vastu classes. I have an entire curriculum of 3 levels of Vastu that you can take at your own pace at home. The level 1 Vastu course, Yoga of Design, I call it, is basic knowledge all humans should have. And that is the sort of thing where anyone can take the course and go through all of the basics. And there's different audio, recorded audio sessions similar to this. There are PDFs of articles and my book and a Vastu Yantra guidebook and lots of different materials for that basic course, Vastu, the Yoga of the Sun, level 1. And then there are 2 more levels, levels 2 and 3, for people who are interested in going more deeply into it, understanding more about the depth of the knowledge, the intricacies, more about how to apply it, although level 1 gives you a lot of practical tips. And levels 2 and 3 are for anyone who's interested, but it's with the goal of, at the end of level 3, being certified to be a Vastu consultant and be able to run around and charge for your services and help people by having enough solid basis in the knowledge to be of service to other people in your community or wherever. And basically, Vastu level 1, anyone can take. Levels 2 and 3 are only open to people who have a daily, regular spiritual practice, and some kind of meditation technique they do every day, and who have been certified at level 1, gotten the certificate of completion, which happens after you take a final exam that's quite rigorous. It's not one of those multiple choice questions that anybody could pass without having even looked at the material. You have to write actual answers. And then if there's anything you miss, I have you study that section, rewrite the exam, and give it back to me so that I can see that you've got all those answers into your head again. So if you make an A or a B on the exam and you're doing a meditation technique, then you can go on to level 2. And at the end of that one, the same thing to go on to level 3. So there's a lot of knowledge available that way in those 3 levels of Vastu courses. I also have a Padmini Vidya course, which is spiritually based prosperity. It's secret knowledge of Lakshmi, lots of different bits of knowledge and techniques and exercises to do to increase your prosperity and abundance on all levels of life, just in alignment with the fact that Lakshmi has many aspects, Ashtalakshmi. So that's a really fun small course that anyone can do. I also have my book, which you can get through the website. It's been out of print for a number of years. I need to get a new publisher. So I do not have hard copy of the original hardback book, but I have it as a PDF form with all the color pictures, all the diagrams, all the illustrations, all the text, everything is there. So all of that is on the website, plus really fantastic yantras that I've been offering for over 20 years after researching all of them that were available 20 years ago and continuing to check around to see if there are any nicer ones that have come out. So I offer all of that. And I also do consultations. I used to go into people's homes and do on-site consultations. At some point, those will be available again. But in the meantime, I do what I've been doing for everyone else in the world who has not flown me to their location. I have you send me the floor plans marked with the cardinal directions with some photos and your questions and issues. And I go over all your materials and write your written report that has an assessment and recommendations. So that is an option also.
Good. And I
all
would,
that's
I'm
on the
sorry.
website.
Sorry, Sherry. Yeah, you mentioned yantras, the use of yantras, and I know that's a whole discussion in and of itself. But I'm wondering if you could just share a few words with how you use yantras
Sure.
and connect it to Vastu.
Yeah. Yantras are, it's another Sanskrit word. Yantra means tool. They're basically really nifty tools that are very pretty, that are sacred geometry. They're the oldest sacred geometry. They're Vedic sacred geometry. And what they do is they're little holographic energy generators that broadcast just the right frequency for specific things. And there's a whole bunch of them that I use for Vastu, some of which are also good for Jyotish remediation. The 9 planets all have their own yantras. And for that person who has a weak sun, you have a debilitated sun, if you put a sun yantra up in your home at the level of your 6th chakra and recite a sun yantra mantra to it on a daily basis, you're going to get a big boost because you're befriending and connecting with that planet. And you're shifting that energetic flow and making it much more supportive for you. So they're really, really handy and just fascinating, and I think quite lovely.
Mm-hmm. I think actually that's how I originally connected with you back in probably 2009 as a Jyotishi, looking for remedial measures that my clients were asking for, and you had these beautiful planetary yantras that I was able to offer my clients. So yeah, that just rang a bell how we initially met. I don't know if there's other questions there that you are comfortable reading. I know you don't want to give specifics recommendations, but maybe you can just look through and see if there's any others that you're.
Okay, there's another question. Does your book speak to remedies for existing structures? Yes, that's basically what the book's about. Most of us are in existing homes, and so it's really, really helpful to be able to bring in some remediation, some remedies, some way of rectifying the spaces that we're already living in. And that's where the yantras come in. And some of it'll be things like moving the head of the bed or making sure that we don't keep all the trash and all the storage in the Northeast, little tips like that. And there's lots of it. I tried to make the book very, very easy to understand. I put a lot of attention into the organization and giving lots of tips. So that'll be helpful. And if you go to my website, you'll find it. The book is Vastu, Transcendental Home Design in Harmony with Nature. Okay, so we have
And I will
more.
just mention too that when I went out to get one, you can get them on Amazon used books, which is the only option that I had. But you know, you can get them in pretty good condition, and the information is there, and the beautiful pictures are there. So it's another option.
Yes, and if you're going to do that, if you don't mind going to my website to the page on how to buy the book and going through my Amazon link, that way I will make a few pennies off of it.
Nice.
I put a lot of work into that book.
Absolutely, I'm sure.
Since it's out of print, any Amazon sales that do not come through a link from me, I get nothing.
Wow. That's good to know.
So it would be really helpful.
Sure.
Okay, there's a question about how Vastu Shastra is connected with Jyotish and numerology and yoga. They're all sister sciences. They all have that same source, and they're all supporting that same thing, giving you optimal situation for the growth of your consciousness so that you too can be enlightened and therefore make even more of a contribution to this planet. And there are various overlaps, some of which we've talked about with Jyotish here. Best place to place our office now in the pandemic. Okay, I don't have time to cover that now, but if you go to my website, I think to one of my most recent blog posts, there are links to several interviews I did that were specifically about recommendations for setting up your home office during the pandemic. There are articles, there are Zoom sessions that I recorded like this one. So go to my website to the blog posts and you'll find that information. Okay, that should help you. There's more questions. I don't know if we have time. Should we do one more?
Sure. I think we've only got one more, so that would be great.
Okay, so there's a question about the desk should be more towards like square shapes so that they have some room in front, for example, after putting laptop on desk rather than regular narrow shape. Okay, the desk can be whatever shape you like. If you want an oval desk, if you want a rectangular desk, a square desk, that's all up to you. But what you want is you want some expansive space in front of you. It's better if your chair is a few inches from the wall and you're facing out into the room, or you're facing into a window that's not in this facing south or west, where you're going to have really harsh light coming in and causing a lot of glare that would give problem for your eyes. Plus, facing south and west do not give you optimal brainwave activity.
Perfect. Good.
Okay. Good. There's obviously lots more things. There's probably some in the chat, but we've run out of time. Thank you so much for this opportunity to be able to share some of this knowledge.
Well, thank you, Sherry. It's been absolutely wonderful. And it's, you know, it's amazing. We take so many things for granted, you know, whether it be the direction that our bed is facing, colors in a room. But like you're saying, everything matters. Everything has an energetic to it. Everything will have an influence on us at various levels. And so it's really kind of heightened my awareness around really being aware and conscious of our environment and being as aligned as possible with it through understanding some of these basics around the directions, the colors, the elements, etc. So we very, very much appreciate it. And for anybody on the call that would like to listen to this again, it is being recorded and we will be posting it on our website. And I would just like to make one quick announcement before going. The next All is Yoga series lecture will be next Sunday, April 18th, and this will be on Ayurveda, and we have Sonia Masako who will join us. She was my teacher at the Ayurvedic Institute, and she is currently teaching herbalism at the University of New Mexico, and she also has her own private practice. So she has spent over 20 years in Ayurveda, but is also very familiar with Chinese, traditional Chinese medicine, Western herbology, etc. She is, just like Sherry, a gem and an expert in her field. So we hope you can join. She's just going to be giving us kind of an overview of the basics of Ayurveda. But I thank you again so much, Sherry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
so appreciate
thank
it.
you. I enjoyed it. And anyone who goes to my website, there's a newsletter you can sign up for, and that way I can keep you in touch
Perfect.
with more tips and so forth.
Nice. Thank you. And thank everyone for attending.
Thank you. Bye.
Namaste.